up until about December 19th.
Okay, we're live. So there's your warning in case you were just gonna, like it wasn't working and now it's working and it's still telling me unsupported request. I think we're okay. It says live on one regard and then it says not live. So this is what people have to deal with usually for the first 2 minutes of my videos where it's like, is this thing on? Is this working? And everybody's very patient and I always value that. So I think I'm going to check it on my phone while we do that.
Sure.
It's saying, okay, I think we're good. I think we're actually on. Okay, cross our fingers and here we go. Hi, everybody. Michelle Ferreri here, Member of Parliament for Peterborough, Kawartha, and I am the Shadow Minister or critic, as a lot of people would like to call it, of families, children, and social development. And so tonight I'm really excited. If you're watching this live, that's wonderful. It is Wednesday, February 1st. It is 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, and different time frames for many other people that are joining us. But you can be watching this after. But if you're watching us now, I'd love you to engage in the conversation we're about to take on. So what we're talking about and the role of the shadow minister and critic, this is actually a great way to get more sort of involved in politics because a lot of people don't know this kind of stuff. What is a critic? What does a shadow minister do? And what is your role? Well, your role really is to shadow the minister who's in government. So the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development is a Liberal minister. Her name is Karina Gould. And she has put forth a bill C-35, and it was tabled in the House just before the end of the 2022 year, so in December. And it's a national plan around child care framework. It is what it's supposed to be around. And I'm not even going to get into the super technical stuff. I can read you the bill if you guys want to hear it. But what the point of this is they've signed 13 agreements with provinces and territories. And then the idea was to put forth this bill, and the idea was to enshrine it so that there was this program across Canada to have this childcare program in place. Now, for anybody who's followed politics throughout your years, childcare has been on the political spectrum, and promised childcare has been on since I was in childcare. I can tell you that. So I'm going to be 44 this year. And so this has been an election promise. It was a promise with the NDP coalition that the Liberals have. So it was an agreement. So then my job, once this bill is put forth, then we go to the House and it's debated in the House. And so my job before that happens is to sit down with stakeholders, and stakeholders are the people who are directly impacted by this bill. So people who work in the industry, frontline workers, parents, childcare operators, registered early childhood educators, and to hear the feedback of where the gaps in the bill would be, if it's a good bill, if it's a bad bill, and then put forth an argument and a debate in the House to bring balance. That's really the role of the critic. And so that's what happens. And then you work with your party and you put up different speakers within your party and you put forth a position on how you feel about that. So we debated it Monday and Tuesday in the House. I spoke on it. If you want to watch it, you can watch it. And today, this afternoon, we did vote on it. Now, we did vote to support it with a condition. And the reason we voted to support it as Conservatives is because we believe there is something to build here. I mean, the reality is that these agreements are already in place. So there's really nothing. It's kind of a backwards legislation in a lot of ways because it's already in place. You can't kind of put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak. So we voted yes, but our real focus here now is to point out where these massive gaps are, where these massive unintended consequences are of this bill, and to ensure that it is equal and fair for all parents and for operators and those working the front lines, all of them. So today, I'm very excited to be joined by two ladies, two powerful women. They were quoted in my speech. I used both of their quotes in my speech because they have beautiful arguments and just points and facts around this because they work in the industry. So joining me is Andrea Hannon of the Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario, or ADCO, and Crystal Churcher, the Association of Alberta Childcare Entrepreneurs. Ladies, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thanks for having us.
Michelle.
It's wonderful to see you both. And I guess I'm going to turn it over to Andrea first, and just your overall thought of the debate in the House, and what you thought and where you think it needs to go.
Well, first of all, my compliments to you and some of your colleagues who did particularly nice job at pointing out some of the shortcomings of the legislation and also some of the risks associated with it. So thank you for that. I guess we've got the agreements that are in place now for the next 5 years. This bill kind of cements a permanent role for the federal government in childcare. And there are some issues around that. It seems like, oh, it's very general, oh, it's just for funding. But let's be really clear. The federal government has normally not been this involved in childcare. And if you look at the actual text of the agreements that have been struck under this Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare program, the federal government is very, very involved. And, it's really an area of provincial jurisdiction traditionally. So, I think everybody needs to be concerned that there is this encroachment into an area of provincial jurisdiction.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we heard that quite a bit from the Bloc as well. I mean, obviously the Bloc speak a lot about that when they're concerned about that. And I want to go to you, Crystal, to hear your overall feedback, and then I'm going to go into some of the quotes. But what was your overall feedback of watching the debate?
I have to say I just loved your speech. I thought that you and Stephanie Kusi just hit it right on the mark. I loved that there was a personal approach to this and some real context, because I think that gets missed a lot. And I felt like, we've talked a lot about this in Alberta recently. There's a lot of media attention around this right now, but there's not a lot of mention of where the children are in this. And it really gets lost. I mean, where are the children? They're supposed to be the whole focus of this. And I feel like that is just missing. And I could really see that clearly from the other questions from the Liberal side of things, and definitely from the NDP. They didn't seem nearly as personable. They didn't seem to really understand the on the ground kind of impact this is having and the collateral damage that is occurring from this. So it was really eye-opening for me. I thought they would be more prepared, to be honest with you.
I felt exactly the same way. I was actually very surprised at to your point, like the lack of personal component to it. But exactly, and I said that in my speech, it is up the children first. That is ultimately what we always have to remember. We're all guilty of this, right? We all get stuck in something and we kind of get worried, and it's like, wait a minute, how does this impact the children? Andrea, I pulled a little quote out of what you had said, and I want you to expand on it about your major concerns with the bill. But the one quote you had said was, taxpayers and the families who use the program will wind up paying more and more for it, while all children will wind up getting less and less. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, our experience in Ontario is based on the rollout of the full day kindergarten program back in late about 2009. And, when the full day kindergarten program started, it was going to be free. Right. So it was free kindergarten. So prior to that, there were lots of families who were sending their children to a full day of kindergarten within licensed childcare centers. But then suddenly, no, it's all going to be in the public schools. Well, it starts out as free, except for that free isn't actually a full day. It's only the school day. So if you need to work before about 8:30 in the morning or after about 3:30 in the afternoon, you were then going to have to pay a wraparound fee. Okay, fine. Well, then the wraparound fee in a lot of areas within $1 or $2 per day of what you would have been paying if you were sending your child to full day kindergarten for that full extended day at a local childcare center. And that would have included a hot meal and 2 snacks. So it gets moved into the public sector. and supposedly it's going to be free, but it's actually not free for the full day. So then you have to pay this little wraparound fee, which is what you would have paid previously, about the same amount as you would have paid previously. And then because that whole system disrupted the typical sort of business model that most commercial and not-for-profit childcare centers had, over 1,000 licensed childcare centers closed in the first 5 years or so of the full-day kindergarten rollout. So now those centers close, not only taking away those kindergarten spaces, but all of the spaces those centers accounted for children of the younger ages that were enrolled in them. So, okay, taxpayers get stuck with this 1.6, I think when it started, $1.6 billion price tag annually for this full day kindergarten program. People who had their children enrolled in center kindergarten programs, in many cases, or in kindergarten programs at centers, lost the care. And so taxpayers are paying more, parents are paying just as much, if not more. Where's the benefit? And all these centers that served other children, younger children, they close. So that's what I meant when I said, parents are going to wind up paying more and more for this. Taxpayers are going to wind up paying more and more for this. And all children are going to have fewer and fewer options. Because, I don't think parents should expect $10 a day is going to stay at $10 a day. And I don't really expect that, families, it doesn't serve all families. And so all families are going to pay for this, but only in Ontario so far, only about 25% of families are going to be able to use it.
Yeah. Nothing's free. I think that's always the number one thing, right? It comes from somewhere. And I think a lot of people are like, okay, well, childcare is an investment. That's great, but the model has to be pretty well thought out, right? Like it has to be sustainable. And I think that's why we kind of have this argument over and over again. I want to go to you, Crystal, because you pointed out the counter argument to what many of the NDP and Bloc and Liberals argued about in the past 2 days, and that this is the best thing for women. And you had some pretty pointed points on the lack of gender equality in this bill. Do you want to touch on that?
I don't know. I found when I read this bill as a woman and as a mother, I was so offended and disappointed. I mean, there is such a disregard for the true operators in childcare in this bill. The majority of childcare operators are females. They're women. They're in Alberta anyway, majority, immigrant women who have come here to start up a business. And this bill, this whole $10 a day program targets women, and it is pushing us out of the industry that we're in. It's actually, in my opinion, it's stealing the values of our businesses that we have built. I feel completely robbed of my investment as a childcare operator at this point. My province is just about to opt into a cost control framework, and under that, I lose all of my value as a private business. I feel that there is a lot of language in this bill around increasing gender equality, as well as, representing women. And I think they even use the language around supporting mothers through this bill. Where are the mothers that are running childcare centers or working in private childcare centers represented under this? Like Andrea spoke of with the kindergarten program, what's going to happen here as we're pushing our private sector out to create a nonprofit standardized childcare system across Canada, we're pushing these women out of their jobs. We're pushing them out of the businesses that they own. And there's just absolute zero representation for that. I use the analogy a lot when I've been doing interviews lately, that if you were to have your property, if you were to have a highway go through your property, the government would offer you a fair market value for your house. I would love to see some fair market value for the businesses that we as women have created in our provinces here. I think that that would be at least a fraction of the respect that we're owed as private childcare operators. That's my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think a lot of the pushback when I would push on these issues and bring this forward in debate was, well, it's independent provincial agreements, right? That was kind of what I got pushed back on that. But when you look at the sort of language and intention written in the bill, I think that was where the debate came. And I'm wondering if you guys can speak on that, because that's where they would say, well, listen, everybody's included. It includes everybody. So Andrea, what do you say to those comments?
Well, I'd say that, the current agreements were struck before this piece of legislation was tabled. These current agreements, if they include independent licensed childcare centers, like childcare centers run as small businesses, that's fine. But these agreements expire in 5 years, right? 2025, 2026, depending on when your province signed. Well, if the new agreements have to follow this piece of legislation as it's currently written, I think it would be very difficult for provinces to then just continue their existing agreements with private operators, because this legislation would seem to make that much harder, because it excludes childcare centers run as small businesses.
It does. And the other piece for people is they've appointed this national council, which has already been appointed. So I don't know why we're voting on this. Again, it's this weird thing. What are we doing? Like, it's like a headline, which is what I called it in my speech. But on this national council, which these people will be paid, they're appointed by the Liberals. So you can imagine there's, who you're friends with kind of thing. But there's zero private representation at that table. So
That's
how
right.
are you going to get, you cannot meet the demand. And going back to the child that needs access to childcare.
Mhm.
The wait lists in this country, and I talked about this in my speech, in my own city, there's 4,200 licensed spaces with our city and county. There's 3,500 people on a wait list, right? And you've got people. I want to read this to both of you, because it came in. All these letters are coming into MPs. So this was sent by a parent. I don't have permission to share the name of the daycare because I didn't get in touch with them before we did this video, but they sent out this letter to all the parents. And it says, "Dear families, effective March 2023, XYZ Daycare is changing its hours of operation to 7 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. Please be advised that we are writing this letter to inform you about the change in our operating hours due to the financial burden of the $10 a day CWELCC, which is what it's often referred to. This program is often called CWELCC. Our fees being locked at the same price for 3 years, and the staffing shortages. We have thought long and hard, and we have made the decision to reduce the operating hours to 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. every day." So this is the issue, and it isn't addressed in this legislation. So I would love to talk about solutions. So Crystal, I'm going to go to you because you have lots of ideas on this. And what are they?
I believe, I'm an Albertan, so I definitely believe in free enterprise and fair market. I believe that a market will correct itself. So I think that, if you have, in Alberta, we have 70% of our market is private operators. That to me translates that there's a need in our province, and that parents have chosen private operators over and over and over again, or we wouldn't be at 70% of our market share. I think that allowing businesses that want to, be childcare operators, as long as we're meeting the same level of quality and regulations and standards. We're a heavily regulated industry. Whether we're nonprofit or for-profit, we are all under the same regulations and the same guidelines in our province. Why does business model matter here? We have such a demand. There is wait lists, like you said. In Alberta, we're seeing 400 or 500 families sitting on wait lists. Let's lift this restriction and just let free market. Let's let people have access to the centers that they want, or access to this program in the centers that they would like. Because at the end of the day, this money is for the families, and they should be able to use it wherever they would like to use it. I think that we're starting to see, just the beginning of the reduction of choice under this program. So anything we can do to allow parents to have their right to choose childcare that meets the needs and interests of their family, their community, whatever they're looking for, and to be able to access the supports in that childcare, I think is the best and easiest solution. I don't know if that's something that would be acceptable under this bill, but I think it all goes back to the parents and giving them back access to this program.
And were those brought forth to the Liberal government, Crystal? Were those conversations had?
I know provincially we've spoken on this, like our association, right from the very beginning when we started our association about 9 months ago, we started this process. That was our first question. Why is this money going through our centers? Why is this money not going directly to the families? We would eliminate the need for these cost control measures. We would eliminate the need for these very expensive audits on private centers. This is public funds, and I understand that, but there's no public funds that are actually sponsoring or servicing our private centers at this point. We're just funneling money from the government to parents in our bank accounts. Let's just give it directly to the parents. I mean, we can do that. I've been asking this too lately, is that there's a dental program that's rolled out and the money is going directly to families to be able to choose a dentist that they want for their children and for that care for their children. I just don't understand why we're not doing that. I know when Minister Gould announced this legislation, someone asked that question, and she very clearly said that would never happen under this agreement. They really believe that they're giving more accessibility to families by offering this to everyone through centers. I think her remark was something along the lines of, this way every family gets it, regardless if they've filed their taxes or they don't need to have access to a CRA account or something to be able to access the funds. I don't really know. My belief is that this is a way of controlling a childcare sector. It's a way of taking over a sector and moving it from a mixed market model to something that is a standardized system across our country. And I mean, as a parent, that is very concerning to me.
Those are all valuable points. And Andrea, to that, we heard some arguments around that, and I'm curious what your proposed amendments would be, because in these rural areas, like to that argument, to Minister Gould's argument of like, this is accessible for everybody, that's just not possible in our geography, in our country, when you have people who don't even have transit, they don't even have centers where they live, right? They have to rely sometimes on grandmothers, neighbors, community, like it's just not feasible. So what do you think, what are some of the solutions you've proposed, Andrea?
Well, we actually, ADCO made a presentation to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs back in 2021. And at that time, we were suggesting that the money should go directly to families, for exactly that reason, because there are only enough childcare spaces in Ontario for about 20 to 25% of the children. And there are about 40%, I saw some statistics, about 40% of families don't use any non-parental care at all. So either they have a parent at home or the parents are spelling off, like working opposite shifts to look after their children. So, that's a large portion of the population. And there's another portion of the population that they use, a home-based childcare that's unlicensed, or, grandma or an aunt or whatever. And, there is no wrong choice, right? The families, it's not for anybody to decide what's the right choice for someone else's family. Families make a variety of choices, and they make different choices at different times in their lives too, right? Because like a change of job, it can be even, change of job, having another baby, there's all kinds of things that change how things are. And, we just didn't think it was very practical to kind of start trying to funnel everybody into licensed childcare, but B, everybody into the institutional sector of licensed care. So these huge public and quasi-public institutions. We were worried about parental choice and also about administrative burden. and cost, right? Because every time you're moving through these large bureaucracies, you're taking a chunk of the money that should be going to families, to helping families, and just it's being frittered away in bureaucracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the biggest issue, the number one issue I heard about across the board when I met with people, and even that letter that I wrote you speaks to the labor problem, the labor crisis,
Yeah.
right? So if you don't have the labor, right, and qualified staff, right? I love this. One of my colleagues said, I don't want people to say the word babysitter. Like this is child care, right? Like you're literally developing little brains. And so what do you think we could be doing to manage this? Because this bill, and I brought this up multiple times in my speech too, there's nothing in it to address the labor issue, right? There's no strategy. There's nothing around that, the wages. Andrea, I'll start with you on that one. What are your suggestions around that?
Well, I think, first of all, those types of issues need to be resolved at the provincial level, not the federal level to some extent. So the more flexible this bill can be, the better, right? Because provinces are going to need a lot of flexibility to make those determinations on their own. But, I know here in Ontario, I mean, there's lots of strategies that we could be using that we're not using. So, first of all, why is it that qualified Montessori teachers have to jump through hoops and, on director's approval and all this kind of stuff in order to work in licensed childcare centers? I think most parents would think, a qualified Montessori teacher could work in a licensed childcare center, and lots of them do work in licensed childcare centers, but there's not really a process to make that easy and straightforward. So I think that would be one thing. But also, how come it takes forever for people who have well qualified international credentials in early childhood education? How come it takes forever for them to get recognized as being equivalent to ECEs and being able to work in a licensed childcare center? I was speaking to a gentleman not long ago, and he was telling me he was from Africa. And he was saying why, and he had started a daycare center. And he said, why did I have to buy the bus in order to be a bus driver? Because he had qualifications from back home that would have made him an ideal early childhood educator. As it stood, it was faster, easier, cheaper to buy a daycare center than it was to get his qualifications recognized.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar comparison, if you will, to healthcare, right? It's like the running joke is, if you want a doctor, call an Uber.
That's
right?
right.
Like that's like it's brutal. It's just, you have these people willing and able to work or qualified. Krista, what about you? What do you think the solution is here to that fair wage market? And the other point, we touched on, I want to bring this up because I heard you guys say this about choice. I know, like, I can only speak for myself, but I wanted to be home so much with my children. Like it is like just the most painstaking thing. Not every mother's like that. Some mothers, like after my second, I was a lot more ready to go back to work. But like leaving your child is so painstaking. But the reality is, most parents, with the cost of living right now, it's not even on the table to stay home, right? Because you have to bring in money, and then you can't go to work because you can't get daycare, right? So it's like this, and then you have a labor shortage because women can't go to work because they can't find daycare. So I want to loop back to you, Crystal, on the labor shortage and fair wages for these people like yourself who are really responsible for our little people.
Well, I think we need to be recognized as professionals. Like you said, we're not babysitters. These are early childhood educators that have like a critical role in development and really in community and our country as a whole down the road, right? I think that our wages just need to start to reflect that. I'm not really sure how that's going to look as an operator who's about to embark on some cost control framework. Don't really know what kind of freedom I'm going to have to continue to top up and increase my own staff's wages at this point. And I know in Alberta, our province has a wage top-up system that has been in place for, I believe, like 15, 16 years, well before this program. And we just had our first announcement that we had a wage increase on this wage program. It was great, and I think like a well-intended first step, but the majority of our sector, unfortunately, are level ones, which is like the lower level of our qualifications in Alberta. And that is because it's very difficult to transfer your certifications over from even within Canada. I'm educated in BC and my credentials don't transfer to Alberta very well. It's very, very difficult, very slow process. But the wage top up was 50 cents for the majority of the workers. That's not enough. I mean, a 50-cent raise when inflation is the way it is. My center is in a rural community and in an oil industry community, competing for staff to come and work in a very demanding, very stressful job at a very low wage for what they're worth is very difficult when you have oil camps that will pay them $45 an hour to come and work outside of their training to go do something like that. It's always been difficult, but people are not coming into our field, unfortunately. I don't feel that there's enough new trained ECEs to entering into our field to replace the ones that left during COVID or the ones that are leaving just from burnout from everything that's happening. So I'm not really sure what the quick answer is. I think that they rolled out this program without the infrastructure behind it to support it. And we're already in a staffing crisis that is just escalating weekly here in Alberta. It's impossible. And I know I've had to shut my center down temporarily because we didn't have enough staff to meet our ratios just due to illness. I've seen that through our members that they're struggling to find staff to even keep the doors open because, like I said before, we're heavily regulated. We need certain levels of staff for the certain number of children that we have. You can't bend on that, unfortunately. So it's very difficult as an operator to juggle these things right now, keep the doors open and find new staff. And I don't really know what the quick answer is on this.
Yeah, it's certainly not a silver bullet, right?
No.
And I think that's where a lot of the cynicism comes because it's like this catchy phrase, right? $10 a day daycare. And I think I have to cough 1 sec. Excuse me. I think that's where a lot of folks are at because it is complicated. It's complex. How do you help all these different families with all these different circumstances get access? So I will leave it. I'm going to give you guys both a chance to just kind of summarize what you would like to see, next steps and messaging that you would like to get out to parents or anybody watching really that sort of, just to bring balance to this discussion, because I think there's still two sides to this coin. I still think a lot of people are like, $10 a day daycare, it's perfect, it's great, it sounds wonderful. And then, some people, how are we going to afford this? I'm not paying for your kids. And so you have both kinds of things. And at the center of it I always say, let's get back to the child. Let's get back to the child, because that's probably the best preventative thing we can invest in, quite frankly, when we look at our future. So I'm going to go to you first, Andrea, if you don't mind, of thoughts you'd like to leave everyone with.
Well, I think that, if the goal is to create more regulated childcare spaces, you need as many people devoted to that task as possible. And that, includes woman-owned small businesses. It includes, not-for-profit organizations. It includes everybody. And the funding needs to be flexible enough. The agreement needs to be made more flexible. It needs to be amended to include everybody. If the goal is to create more spaces, let's not decide in this agreement by who's disqualified from participating. And that's what I see. That's where I see our recommendations is really, we don't want to disqualify anybody from participating. The goal has to be to provide the service for the families, not to build a system. It's to provide a service to families.
You ready? Did you want to run for politics, Andrea? That was pretty good. That was come sit beside me. What'd you know? I love that. I love how you said that. Service for families, right? That is what we are elected to do too, is to serve people. I really like that. That's a great way to say it. Krista, what about you?
I don't know if I can top that, Andrea. I think that one of the key messages I love to try and get out there is that as much as we can call this a publicly funded program, this money is for families. This money is not going to create private spaces. Private operators have and continue to fund our own spaces. These are investments that women like us have made to creating childcare centers to meet the needs of our communities. These are not publicly funded centers. We have public funds that are running through our centers currently that are going to families. And I think we can't lose focus that this money is for the families, and it needs to be respected that they have a choice in where they want to use it and where they want to access that funding. And I think that, you know, we can't lose focus on the core of this program, which is the children, like you said, Michelle, and to really preserve the quality and the integrity of our programs. And I always have this doubt that a $10 a day program can really make sure that the quality stays the way it is in our programs and that the integrity is kept, and that parents can get the type of programming that they're expecting from us. I'm concerned about that as we move forward, that with a $10 a day program, we're going to lose the quality of childcare. And I think that that's been modeled in Quebec if we look back at their system. So I think parents need to ask themselves, what is the cost of a $10 a day program? What are they willing to lose in order to gain a $10 a day program? And I mean, I'm all about affordable childcare, but I think we just need to make sure that we aren't losing the intent of this program, which is for the children, for the families, and to make sure that the quality is there.
I think that's really well said. And I thank you both for this discussion and your input. And I think for everybody watching at home, sort of the next steps now, well, it will go to committee, and we will be bringing forth witnesses to sort of testify on what they think and how to strengthen it and bring forth these amendments that will make it more well-rounded and to really close the gaps, these major gaps that we see in it. So if you're watching and you think you would be a valuable witness, or you have a story, you know, please reach out to our office or your MP's office, but our office would be happy to have you, as I'm the shadow minister. So it's Michelle, I can put it up in the email because it's such a gross email. Government emails are gross. Michelle.Ferrari@parl, like Parliament, PARL.gc.ca. And, you know, we'd love to hear from you. And I've gotten so much feedback in the last little bit, and some pretty heartbreaking stories, if I'm going to be honest with you. This is a very emotional issue, which we talked a lot about. And so I like you guys bringing sort of the pragmatic end of things, of like what we can do, because at the end of the day, we do have to be logical and pragmatic and think ahead of what's going to come. And I love that. That's, if I could bookend this, Andrea, because at the beginning, we kind of had to look into the future of what happened with this full-time daycare, and it was supposed to be free, and it was supposed to be all these things, but it just a little bit, but well, now you got to pay for this, and now you got, and it just collapsed. The system wasn't created to sustain itself, and it collapsed. And I think we're going to see the exact same thing if we are not, if we're not ahead of the game here. So I think you guys have summarized it really well. Anything else you guys want to say before we wrap up?
No, just thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. This is really important that you're bringing a voice to this. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think that's actually the best way to solve all problems, quite frankly, is to listen to all voices. I really do believe that wholeheartedly, even, and I love debate, because that's the point of debate, right? Is to bring forth all of these kinds of things and then figure out how we can solve it. So we're here for you. We're here for your children. And thank you guys so much for the work that you do. I saw so many MPs get emotional yesterday. Tracy Gray, she got really emotional when she talked about her childcare provider. And it was like, I think all of us in the room were like, yeah, like they become a part of your family. So really value all of you and all of the work that you do. So thank you guys. And thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now I got to figure out how to turn off live Facebook video. So everybody just, you know, keep it together while I figure this out.